Hey, Landon.
What's up?
You know, ever since I was a small boy podcaster, I've had one dream, and that dream is to have a presenting sponsor. And today, this dream became a reality. And why don't you tell the people about it?
Today and every episode's presenting sponsor is going to be FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
So thanks to the good folks at FVF Law for making that happen for us. And everybody enjoyed the show.
Hello, friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. On today's show, we're going to chat briefly with the Austin FC beat writer for the Austin American-Statesman, Mike Craven. We're also going to be joined by our good friend Chris Wellhausen to review La Copita and preview the first regular season game versus LAFC. My name is Landon Cottom, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley, and I am joined, as sometimes, by Chris Wellhausen.
Howdy, y'all. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, Chris. So we are kind of talking a bit off air for a second about how we feel leading into this first game week, and we decided to save it for this portion of the show because it was prime content. So, Chris Wellhausen, how are you feeling?
First of all, every time I am on this pod, I think it's prime content. So I don't know why I had to give the disclaimer. Little humble brag, but man, I'm amped up. I'm going to be honest. Like, I knew it was going to be emotional when we got here to game week. I did not expect this level of energy. I mean, we're recording pretty late at night, and I feel like if Wolf knocked on my door, was like, I need you to go run a half marathon, it'd be the first half marathon of my life, and I'd complete it instantly. I am like so unbelievably amped. I don't think I'm going to sleep. It's like all Christmases of my life, all Christmas Eves of my entire life is how I feel right now, combined into 1 week.
I just pictured little baby Chris Wellhausen as a kid in like footy pajamas on Christmas morning, just like bouncing out of his skin. He's so excited.
Dude, more like 27-year-old Chris Wellhausen. The joy doesn't stop.
Jeremiah, how about you? How are you feeling?
Well, you know, I talked about this, but you know, it's been such a journey that it's a little bit surreal, and it has not quite become real to me yet. And so at some point, probably Friday, I'll be in full Wellhausen mode. I'll have to text you, let you know when I catch up with you. But yes, I haven't processed it yet. Never go full Wellhausen.
Never
okay.
go full Wellhausen.
I think this is something that frustrates my wife, but she's a bit of a feeler. Like, she feels a lot of emotions, it's a good thing.
Amen.
But I'm like a kind of person who like is never too high, never too low, and I just kind of sit in this middle space all the time. And so over the last couple of weeks, I've had to like tell myself, like, let yourself be excited, like be excited about this because it's a very special moment. And I just like think back at like to, I don't know, 3 years ago. When did we meet, Jeremiah? Probably at least.
Yeah, like October 17, right? So
something like that.
Yeah. Over 3, yeah.
So yeah, a long time ago, and like it's all been leading up to this, and like I am very excited, but I think just like my general levels are a little bit different than Chris's, and so like I might not be showing it, but I am very excited. And also, I got my second COVID vaccine yesterday,
yeah,
so
nice.
I've got a little of those second shot blues going on today, and feel a little bit shivery and tired all day. So that's not helping my excitement, but I am extremely excited for this game.
Well, don't worry, guys. I think I've got enough excitement for like half the city right now, so we should be covered across the board.
All right. Well, we want to kind of give a little review of La Copita. But before we do that, we're going to jump into last week's press conferences. As always, it was Josh Wolf. Jeremiah, what were some of the things we learned in that midweek press conference with Josh Wolf?
Well, one of the things that I wrote in here that KVU covered is he talked a lot about possessing the ball and playing attacking football. And so on the KVU had a special last night, like an hour long, or Sunday night, depending on when you're listening, had an hour-long preview, and they'd strung together like every time he'd said that in a press conference. And there were like 10 different occasions of those statements. So he used both those in there. You know, I think we had discussed a little about the load, about how many games they're playing. And so one of the other things that he mentioned was really intentional to sort of get them to persevere through tired legs in the preseason and see what they look like when they're playing their the third game in 7 days by the time they got to San Antonio.
And we'll get into this in the La Copita stuff, but in those last 2 games, most players went 90. And he was intentionally not making subs to try to push these guys and see where they were at as far as their fitness goes. So I thought that was an interesting point.
Yep, he did that. He talked about, sort of the responsibility the club feels about being the first professional team in Austin. I don't remember who asked him that. Bill's asked him about Berhalter, who I think has become one of your favorites, right, Landon?
Oh yeah, I'm pretty high on Lil Sebastian.
Little Sebastian.
Little Sebastian. Yeah, and he talked about all these like super coachy technical things. Ball security, ball processing. I don't even know what that is, but apparently he's pretty good at it. And then just sort of his emotional maturity is like being a coach's kid and growing up around that environment. And then, those are the big things out of Wolf. We got Gallagher. We got John Gallagher for the first time for like 10 minutes too. He talked a lot about how much he liked eating in Austin and how he'd spent more money than he should in the first month. And then they asked him about the culture. I thought this was pretty instructive to what we've heard about Josh Wolf's system. But they had to compare like the team culture in Atlanta and Austin. And he talked about how Atlanta was a lot more loose. And the team leaders in Austin, which I think he specifically talked about Ring, Beasler, and Sweat, I think, had done a really good job of like instilling discipline and kind of making sure everybody came to work every day and came to play and wasn't messing around. So
I can imagine. Can you imagine showing up 5 minutes late to practice and Ring is the dude that's like gonna confront you about it? I would be terrified. I'd never be late again.
The kind of the tone setting by the leaders. We've heard enough players talk now that I like those things are starting to ring very true. And I think if you heard one player say like, oh, the like practices have been super impressive. They're very structured. We're learning a lot. Everybody's working super hard. If you heard one guy say that, sure, whatever, he could just be like giving the company line. But we've heard some of these younger guys who aren't as press savvy seem like they're speaking pretty honestly and pretty earnestly, saying these exact same things and just saying that they're very impressed with how structured everything is and how clear the plan is and how good of a teacher Wolf is. So I just another player, Gallagher here, saying those exact same things. So I thought one of the most interesting parts was a question that you asked him, Jeremiah, about him playing number 9. And so why don't you go over a little bit about that question and kind of the answer that he gave you?
Yeah, well, the question was, because obviously his style of playing 9 is different from Danny Houston's, and it was, did Josh Wolf set them up to perform those roles differently, or was it just, he was just playing to his strengths? So really the question was like, how much flexibility did he have in his approach to the role? And he said a little bit of both was his first answer, but he did talk a lot about the difference in their styles. And so I really think it was Josh telling them to, play it in the way that leads to his strengths. And so he said, Houston's more of a traditional hold-up style midfielder, and his job is to midfielder, number 9. And then his job is to more stretch the field and create space for himself and create space for others, which, I mean, given that what he said, he's played every position but goalkeeper.
Yeah. He said he played center back even for Atlanta at one point, which is crazy. He ended the season playing as their number 9 and was their leading scorer.
And the thing that he didn't say specifically that he made it seem like is that he was training on the wing, because he talked about not training at 9 at first, and assumed when Schoenfeld got hurt, like they didn't have another option. And that's they moved him up, because he said he wasn't originally a 9. That wasn't where he was, but that he'd transitioned to that.
He also didn't act like he was like thrilled to be playing there. Did you get that sense?
I got that sense, yeah. He didn't seem like he loved it.
He's like being a trooper about it. He wasn't complaining, but you got the sense that like he's like a little bit like, yeah, I'm doing it because they're asking me to, and I'm going to do my best, but I'd rather be on the wing.
Yeah, I think he said he was a victim of his own flexibility in some ways, is what he mentioned.
Yeah. All right. Let's we'll get to talk about Gallagher more in our kind of state of the team bit when we get to that in a second. But let's move on to the little Sebastian Berhalter segment. What did we learn from him?
Yeah, he talked about sort of growing up around soccer, because this was a question I think Bill's asked.
Yeah, that's right.
Wolf asked Josh Wolf about Berhalter and sort of having, a coach and a dad and a mentor and all that, and how that sort of was reflected in the player.
And for background there, Coach Wolf and Berhalter not only coached together in MLS, but they played together in Germany. And so Berhalter's kids and Wolf's kids were all around each other since they were little kids in Germany and then in Columbus again. So they've known each other. Their families have known each other since those kids were born, pretty much.
Yeah, he talked about sort of growing up around pros and what that meant. And I think you could see that in his approach. And even like it was the youth, just the way he answered questions and was comfortable about it a way. He was, he's really natural. Like he's clearly a professional player's kid and taking advantage of that. He did talk about learning from Alex Ring, which would make a lot of sense if you're defensive mid, playing the same position. And then another, I think, interesting thing that was reflective of Josh's style is, somebody like me asked about, although I think it was really your question, right? Because you couldn't make it.
Oh yeah. We were all sending questions into each other because I wasn't going to be there.
Yeah. Was about what the difference was between playing the 6 in Austin versus playing the 6 in Columbus. And he said it was a little bit easier here because the role was very clearly defined and there was less freelancing opportunities available.
Yeah, that makes, I didn't think about that, but it makes a lot of sense because Columbus has mostly played a double pivot system with like their starters are usually Nagbe and Artur. And so like Artur is the more defensive of them, but it usually ends up in front of Nagbe. And so here with just that one pure 6, I could see how it would make a young player kind of feel a bit more comfortable knowing like this is what you're here to do. These are your responsibilities. Only worry about these things. Whereas in that double pivot, you kind of have to read the game a little bit different and read your partner and kind of play off of what they're doing. So I hadn't really thought about that, but it makes a lot of sense. One other thing that Chris Bills brought up that I thought was interesting is he compared Berhalter's playing style to Will Trapp, who is kind of like Greg Berhalter's other son. And like he played with him played under him at Columbus, and then was kind of like during the transition period into the national team. Trapp was always there, even if he wasn't playing, was on the sideline talking to players and kind of helping people understand the system that he's trying to install there. And so it's really interesting to see him play that way, but I really like the fact that he's got kind of that finesse game that Trapp has, but Trapp is not really a defensive force. And now he's going to get to play with Ring, who will knock a dude out every once in a while. And I like that he's going to get that influence and kind of learn from a different style of 6 while he's here. Any other press conference stuff before we move on?
No, let's move on and talk about La Copita briefly before we get into what we have in store for the season.
All right, let's do it. So FC Dallas ended up winning the entire tournament. I don't think they lost any games. We had talked about what the cup was going to look like, and it was a very small metal cup, which was kind of fun. Austin FC's final game was versus San Antonio FC. This one was not streamed, and so we didn't get to watch it, but there were a lot of supporters there, and Chris Bills was there standing on a hill looking over a fence into the field and could kind of make out the game. So we got quite a few updates from Chris Bills about the game. Before we jump into that, Chris Wellhausen, you kind of helped organize getting all those fans out there, and I'm sure a lot of people listening will have seen the video of the fans up on the hill there. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, it's so funny when I started talking with guys like Rigo and Kirk and Mateo about wanting to do something like this for the preseason tournament. My intention in the beginning was like, this should be done on the down low. And I don't, in case this is not like a okay thing to do, I don't want my name out there but now it's like, it's been published everywhere that I've been very involved, but so clearly great at keeping secrets, but no, it was amazing, man. I think anyone that knows me well and has listened to me talk about soccer knows that what I'm most passionate about is fan culture. And the reason we went out there is just to really show like this is different than the kind of fan culture you see at some of the other clubs around the country. And it's just a whole new level. And we want to prove that. And I think this is a great testament to that, because I mean, on Saturday versus San Antonio, we had over 100 people show up. And you know, if you haven't seen the video, go look it up on Twitter. And I mean, it's really incredible. The energy was high. And I think that's part of the reason maybe I'm a little more amped than you guys right now, because I was just so pumped up, like singing with those guys. And it was the full 90. You know, I mean, you always talk about fans you respect around the world, and they're the ones that sing the full 90, but singing full 90 on a dirt mound outside, like just over a fence outside of a preseason game, like that's intense. That's dedication. And it was amazing, man. It was fun. The players came over at the end and cheered for us, and we got to sing Alex Ring happy birthday, which he seemed really touched by. And it was just like a cool moment of realizing like how intertwined I think the fans and the players are in creating the club as a whole. It was a really special experience for me.
Yeah, those videos were great. So if any of you listening to this for some reason haven't seen any of those, go find that video of Alex Ring walking up, like kind of walking towards them as they're singing happy birthday to him. That's pretty special. So the game that was at was the final game of La Copita versus San Antonio, as I mentioned before. Austin FC won 5-1. The goals were by 2 from Cecilio Dominguez, 1 from Danny Houston, 1 from Pochettino on another free kick, which looked like it was pretty good. Again, we don't have any footage of this, but
I've got to interject. So just because it was one of the brief moments I got a clear view of, it looked better than the first one that we seen. Like, it was beautiful. It was just kissed the top of the crossbar or the bottom of the crossbar and went in, and it was just like, I remember turning to Chris Haig when we were there, and I was like, is he just gonna like break records this year? Like, it's gonna be every game. Like, it was amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty encouraging to see him. We've been worried about where goals are going to come from, and if we can get one of those every few games, that would help a lot. And then the last goal was a penalty that Alex Ring scored. Like I said, we didn't get to see a ton of this, so we weren't sure what exactly it looked like, but most of the players went 90 minutes. We think we've got a pretty good idea of who the starting 11 is from this game, because the next day they played Rio Grande Valley and played a completely different 11, most of whom also went the full 90. And so the starting 11 versus San Antonio FC was Brad Stuver in goal, Nick Lima, Johan Romagna, Matt Beasler, Ben Sweat, Daniel Pereira, Alex Ring, Tomas Pochettino, Jared Stroud, Danny Houston, Cecilio Dominguez. And then Andrew Tarbell played for a half, and then Freddie Kleeman played for about 15 minutes or something like that. Other than that, they went the full 90. It looks like Wolf was, like he said in the press conference, is really trying to push their conditioning and kind of make sure they can actually go a full 90 when they need to. Then in there was a post-game press conference. What did Wolf say about the game in the press conference, Jeremiah?
Yeah, Chris, Bills asked him about the fan support, and he talked about the players recognizing it, enjoying it, and how they didn't really... I don't know if you got this, Chris. Like, I felt like after the Dynamo game, and I think maybe you could make it because it was Easter, but like after fans were out there, like I wondered if it was going to be okay, you know? And then I think Bills asked for pre-court at the stadium about it, and pre-court's like, yeah, it was great, we loved it. And like for me, that was like a sigh of relief. It's like, oh, we should, like, it's cool, we should go do this again. And then to hear Wolf bring it up in the post-game press conference after the second match, I thought was really cool too.
And I think going back to that first game against Houston, where there were quite a few fans out there, like 50 or 60 fans, I think, for that one. I heard some people say that they were a little bit disappointed the players didn't come over after that one, but I don't think the game was over. Like, they did some more scrimmage stuff afterwards, so I don't think the players were like done. Yeah. Otherwise, I imagine they would have gone over there and waved. So I think fans can feel better about that part of it as well, just because by the time they were actually done, most of the fans were gone.
Well, Wolf, I think, actually addressed it and said that in that game, they went out to thank them, but they had already left after that post-game scrimmage. And so I was actually really encouraged to hear that, because I think, you know, like I said earlier, it's all intertwined, you know, the connection between the players and the fans. And it's cool to see they seem really mindful of that and really appreciative of that extra effort that's being made. And I'm glad Wolf addressed it, because it was nice to hear that.
I imagine if any player ever tries not to do that, Matt Beasler will probably drag them over by their ear to do it.
Yeah, or Ring will just glare at them until they do. And the other thing, I'm sure we're going to get into this when we do state of the team, but he did say there's a real deal keeper competition. And I think the minutes that Stuver and Tarbell each played is evidence of that. He did say he hoped that one of them would separate, from the other. And I guess that hasn't happened yet. So they're both going to get their chances, which I thought was an interesting point that's reflected in like the minutes people played too.
Jared Stroud was also interviewed. Was there any highlights from his little bit?
Yeah, I guess he talked about well, again, we could cover this, like positional flexibility, and then he's training on both wings. And he played where he did because Rodney was out. So hopefully Rodney will be back for LAFC. And then I think we can probably expect a very high scoring match versus LAFC because both Stroud and Wolf talked a lot about how LAFC likes to press and play the style of play, and that's going to open them up to the counter. And they're going to be there's going to be chances when they spread the field out.
Yeah, I thought something very interesting when Stroud was talking is he said that he like mentioned similarities between here and Red Bull, and he like specifically mentioned like their pressing, and I was like, interesting. We haven't like they've been doing some counter pressing like when they lose the ball, but we haven't seen like full on Red Bull pressing.
Yeah. And
maybe we'll see more of that as the players get more fit, or maybe he's just talking about those little moments of counter pressing. But I thought that was really interesting because that's something that Stroud would shine doing. And maybe some solace knowing that if Rodney's not able to go, that he'll be there to do that. But
I know that Wolf too had talked months and months ago about utilizing the heat in the summer here in a pressing system, because if you're not used to it, it's even harder to run the full 90 on. And I just thought that was brilliant. Like, that is a huge home field advantage we have. And having guys like Jared Stroud who are good pressers, I think in the long run, when we have that back end long stretch of home games, is going to be amazing to watch that press and the heat that they've become acclimated to.
So after La Copita, I think we have a pretty good idea of who the preferred starters are, because the preferred starters we think were the ones playing against San Antonio. The backups played against RGV. I want to go through position by position and just kind of do a state of the team. Who do we think is going to be the starter against LAFC, and how do we feel about that? And so, like I said, let's go from back to front, and we can just kind of talk through each one. So at goalkeeper, as we talked about before, Wolf says that there's still a competition going on there, and he said that both of them are going to be getting minutes. Brad Stuver said in some press availability last week, I believe, that they're still competing. So who do we think we're going to see against LAFC? Do you have any idea?
I'll stick with Tarbell personally. I haven't seen anything from Brad Stuver so far that makes me in the matches. It makes me go away from that opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll even take it another level. I think Wolf's playing mind games a little bit with the comment he made, because both those guys weren't nailed on starters at their old team. And I think if I were Tarbell coming in after that playoff experience with the Crew this past year, I would assume it's kind of my spot to lose. I really think he said that to like hype him up and say, you better work this week and be ready, because this is not going to be handed to you. But because I mean, especially after his playoff performance with the Crew, you'd think you'd have to play Tarbell against such a good team as LAFC, and the intensity that will come with this first game and the pressure of that. And he's just more proven in those settings.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Tarbell, but this is maybe the one that I'm like least confident about as to like who's going to be the starter on Saturday and who's going to be the long-term starter. But I think Tarbell does still have the edge. I think he looked a little bit better in those preseason games and probably had the edge already coming in. So I think that's who we'll see.
Well, we'll all look foolish when Brady Scott is the nailed-on starter come Saturday.
I mean, he gave up 2 versus RGV, though, right? So, I mean, that's not a good sign.
Brady Scott did?
Yeah, didn't Brady Scott play the RGV match?
Yeah,
well, he's probably just getting it out of his system.
I do think in Chris Bills' report that he said that he got like hung out to dry a couple of times, too. So I don't know that those are entirely his fault. Let's move on to right back. So I think this one's easy. Nick Lima, period. He's the right back, right?
Yep.
I feel pretty good about that. How do y'all feel about Nick Lima at right back?
I feel good about it. It's going to be a big test for him, because he'll be matched up against Diego Rossi, which is one of the best players in the league, and especially in one-on-one situations. So think it's gonna be tough, but yeah, it's got to be Lima. He's too good.
I think something interesting about Nick Lima, I don't know if you guys were able to listen to the MLS Assist podcast, which is hosted by a friend of the show, Joe Lowry. They were doing very specific predictions for each of the teams in the West on the show, the most recent show. And his prediction for Austin FC was that they would use inverted fullbacks more than any other team. And I think he's making that prediction having not seen these preseason games, because that didn't happen in any of these preseason games. Nick Lima was used by Greg Berhalter as, instead, like in a traditional, like modern fullbacks, they'll overlap and kind of push up the field. In this system, instead, the left back would kind of slide in as a third center back, and that right fullback, who was Lima, would slide into like a double pivot in the midfield. And so it's a thing that Nick Lima is capable of doing and would be very good at, but we've not seen it yet. Would you guys be surprised to see Wolf kind of throw that out there as a surprise tactic against LAFC?
I would. I think Lima, while he's capable of doing that, and we saw it with the national team, of playing that kind of inverted fullback role and being more defensive, I think he's just super talented too at being a part of the attack. I mean, he's got a great long distance shot on him. He's got a decent cross. He's got a bit of pace to him as well. I think he'll be utilized more as an attacking fullback than as that kind of old Berhalter, like double pivot kind of inverted fullback setup.
Yeah, I think it's something we could see at some point in the season, but it doesn't really seem like that's what Wolf is trying to do right now. So I would be surprised if we saw it early, but again, he could, like you said, could be playing mind games with LAFC and could throw a wrinkle in there at some point. Let's move on to center back. This is probably one of the points of contention. So I think we can all agree that Beasler is the guy on the left. Any objections there?
Only objection is I love Freddie Kleeman, and I wish he got the spot, but it will be Beasler.
So the one that's up for grabs, or maybe up for grabs, is the right center back. Romagna started against San Antonio with that group of starters, and Kleeman came on late and played about 15 minutes and played on the right, which we hadn't seen him there yet, and played next to Beasler. So that was kind of a new combination that it looks like maybe he was trying out. Who do you guys want to see on the right at that center back spot?
I'd still like to see Romagna, and I feel like that's who it's going to be, because despite not amazing play, I mean, he's stuck with him. You know, he started the Houston match, and then when we had San Antonio and it was all the starting lineup, like he came back to him. So Josh Wolf seems pretty committed to the Johan Romagna experiment, as far as I can tell.
Chris, what about you?
I go back and forth on this constantly in my head. I think he's going to start Romagna just based on the preseason lineups. I almost wish he would start Cascante, just because I think Cascante's got more league experience. He's played this team before. I think, and I hope, that Wolf is more willing to play more like a low block, deep lying defensive approach than like try to enforce this possession game, in which case I think Cascante would be less at risk for being caught on the break, and where we've seen him exposed pretty badly in preseason. And just, I like Romagna. I'm really big on him, but he's mistake prone right now. And we saw that in preseason too. And this is a team that like will capitalize on any mistake easily. They're a high pressing team. Those center backs are going to be really in the thick of it. And I think knowing that, part of me hopes that Wolf plays a low block, not necessarily parks the bus, but, you know, brings the bus around at least, and you anchor Cascante and utilize what I think he's got a bit more composure on the ball.
The way that I'm thinking about it is, if Carlos Vela or Diego Rossi gets into space and it's the keeper and there's one defender that's in the general area, and it's got to be one of those three guys. It's either Cascante, Romagna, or Freddie Kleeman. Who are you picking to make that play? For me, it's Romagna. I think Romagna is most of the mistakes that he's been making. He has made some defensive mistakes, but most of his mistakes have been with the ball, either playing a sloppy pass, a sloppy touch. But as far as just someone who's physically gifted enough to even stand a chance at maybe shutting down or like even tackling Carlos Vela or Diego Rossi once, I think he's the guy.
I mean, yeah, if that's the only situation, and LAFC definitely can counter, but what they're best at is this like kind of Klopp-esque heavy metal press. And the mistakes, almost 100% of the big mistakes Romania made was not being able to play out of the back yet because he's still learning the system. I mean, if you watched the Club America game and the Champions League and the CONCACAF Champions League with LAFC, I think all three of their goals were on a high press, and two of them were from Vela. So I think for that reason, I'm hesitant to start him because he's only got to make two bad passes out of the back, and they're way too quick and way too lethal to not take advantage of that. Whereas I think, like I said before, you bring the defensive line back and you hold Cascante as an anchor rather than someone who has to cope with a counter if you're bringing the line up. And I think he would do better tactically in that setup. But it depends on what Wolf does. I think, yeah, in your situation, Romania is going to recover quicker and be better. But I don't know. I think I'd pick Cascante.
He's just like, I just worry Cascante can't make one false step because if he does, he's toast.
It almost seems like he's not completely fit right now. Like, I think Chris Bills mentioned that he and Kleeman both looked pretty tired at the end of that 90 against RGV. And so, yeah, maybe even if he was favored right now, maybe he's not even fit enough to be starting. But I don't know. That's definitely one of the spots I'll be keeping an eye on as the lineups come out on Saturday. Let's move on to left back. I think this one's pretty clear right now as well. Ben Sweat, any objections there?
My only potential objection is I could see Wolf saying, let's only have one fullback go up, which Lima is the best to do that. And Vela is such a threat on that right wing. Let's play Jimenez, who's this experienced veteran and can play there, and have him hang back to cope with a potential counter as a back three that sits at all times. And so that's the one thing I could see happening. But I think, again, based on preseason, it's probably going to be Sweat, and he just tells him to not be as forward thinking as he may normally against a more leveled opponent.
Yeah, I think Josh Wolf is going to stick to his guns. I don't think we're going to see many changes just because we're playing a good team on the first game.
You're just falling right into his mind games, Landon.
I think long term, Kolmanich could push him for that spot. Aiden Stanley, I think he's looked fine, but I don't think he's done anything to stand out really, or like to take that spot away from Sweat. I think Sweat has actually been pretty solid in these preseason games. Yeah. I don't think he's done much to lose that spot. And so Kolmanich just got out of quarantine not more than a few days ago and hasn't been with the team very long. So long term, I think he's got a chance to push for that spot. But right now, I think Ben Sweat's the guy, and I'm actually fine with that. I think he's looked good. I think he's given me some confidence in him to hold that spot down for the time being. All right, let's move on to the number 6. Again, easy, Alex Ring. I think he's one of our best players, and I think he's going to show to be one of the best at his position in the league this year. I don't think he was really put in a position to shine in New York last year or part of the year before even, for that matter. But I think he's going to be in a spot where he feels really natural. I think he's going to do really well, and I think he's going to get some attention from around the league as far as when you're talking about who the best sixes in the league are. I think his name's going to come up.
Yeah, it's got to be Ring, right? I mean, he's arguably looked the best out of the entire team in preseason. And this is a game that is going to be won or lost in the midfield because both teams like to play possession. So it's got to be him. He's such an enforcer. He's going to help us dictate that tempo in a big way.
Yeah, I agree that style is really important too, for us to have a chance to hold up. Is like just the way he plays the 6 and the threat he is. I think will be really important.
Yeah. As I mentioned before, been super encouraged by little Sebastian's play so far. So really happy. I think there's some spots where we're not super deep. It seems that Hector Jimenez is our preferred backup right back and left back at the moment. And so, like, say Nick Lima gets injured and Jimenez is playing right back, and then like there's a few spots where I still feel that we're a little bit thin. But I'm pretty happy with our 2-6s right now. If Ring had to be out for a little while, I'd be pretty happy with Berhalter stepping in for a few games if he needed to.
Agreed.
Let's move on to the left wing. Cecilio, right?
Has to be.
Has to be.
I watched through the Dynamo game again. On that first watch, you didn't see a ton of him doing anything dangerous. And until I watched it again, I kind of took that to mean like maybe he didn't have a very good game. Whenever he got the ball, he was fine. Like, I don't think he played bad. I think the team needs to do a better job of getting him the ball in dangerous positions where he can do more dangerous things. A lot of times when he received the ball, it was kind of more of like an outlet, or like he had to step away from a man and like get it running away from goal out towards the touchline. So I just don't think he got the ball in many dangerous areas. But whenever he did get it, he was showing his quality. So I'm not worried about Cecilio. I think this is kind of the system thing. They need to kind of gel together and figure out how to get him the ball where he needs to get the ball. And once they start doing that, I think he's going to look good.
Yeah, and he, like in Dallas, he drew a penalty like 2 minutes in or something. He was dangerous, and obviously he was super dangerous against San Antonio since he scored, twice in the first 30 minutes or whatever. So I feel better about that than I did from the first time I watched the Houston match.
Yeah, then we got super sub Copita. There's his backup, who I think Copita's looked good. I don't think he's looked so good that you would need to shoehorn him into this lineup at any spot. But if Cecilio gets tired or needs to come off, or they end up shifting stuff around, I feel good about Copita coming off the bench with his pace and kind of his busyness on the ball. I think he could really do some damage late in games.
Yeah, I really think Copita is one of our two really super subs, if we're being honest. Like, he's got so much pace. He's so good in those one-on-one counter-attacking moments. Like, if you've got a tired team you're trying to edge against, I think he's the perfect substitute to throw on and just really go at players.
Who's your other one? You said one of two.
Well, I don't know what the position is next, but I think Fagundes would be my other super sub.
Okay.
That is where we're going next, is the two free 8s, 10s. Wolf calls them 10s. Can we just make a decision now to call this position the 10s, the two 10s? From now on,
has such a fun ring to it. I'm so
I think Matt Doyle usually calls it a free 8, which I think is why I do that, because he's the one I usually hear talking about these things. But Wolf has called them 10s, so I'm going to call them 10s. Pochettino and Pereira started with that starting group against San Antonio, and then Fagundes and Argudo played against RGV. What have y'all thought about Fagundes so far?
I've been underwhelmed. I can't think of a lot of creation he's done. I watched both those, Houston and Dallas, pretty closely, and I there wasn't a moment where I'm like, oh yeah, I've got a lot of love for Diego in my heart, and I want him to be good, but I have not seen a lot out of him in the preseason that leads me to believe that he's going to have that big bounce back that I hoped he would have.
Have you accepted Diego Fagundes into your heart, Jeremiah?
I have, and I'm sad about it now.
I agree with you, Jeremiah. I think he's been fine. He's not made any mistakes or done anything really bad, but for the most part, it seems like he gets the ball and kind of recycles it to another player or just kind of moves it along. But I haven't seen him do anything super dangerous with it yet. So yeah, I don't think he's done much to show that he deserves that starting position over Pereira. Pereira has made some mistakes, but I think his highs have been higher than Diego's in this preseason.
Well, surprise, surprise, I disagree with both of you. I think he's looked good. You've got to factor in these preseason performances. Who's he playing with? He's been on the B team, which I think is revealing of who we'll see this weekend. But have we seen him play with Cecilio? Have we seen him get really solid time with Husin, who's going to make the runs for him to create with, who's going to feed off of his one-touch passing? Like, he's shown really good spurts. And I would say, too, the biggest takeaway I've had from him is he was pretty outward, and Landon, you've mentioned this a few times in saying he doesn't want to play defense. And I saw him track back a lot in some of those preseason games and really hustle. And if he's willing to do that, like, I think he's going to be amazing for us. And I think he does have that quality. I just don't think he's been surrounded by the players on the field in preseason to really bring it out.
That is one thing that has kind of surprised me with him playing in that spot. I've when we were doing our like picking 11s leading up to these games, I always looked at that position as like a stylistic choice. And if they wanted to play like a bit more forward and like attack minded, that Fagundes would be the option there. And if they were looking to sit back a little more, then Pereira might be the option. But he's really played it the same way as those other two guys. Like he's not really changed the style of the game, which I think Wolf is thinking about it more of like a like for like replacement and less of like a stylistic change if Diego's in there. So yeah, you could be entirely right, Chris, that he just hasn't had the pieces around him to win that spot or to look good. But I think before these games, they were mixing those squads quite a bit, and he was playing with some of those guys in the scrimmages and in practice and things like that. And Danny Pereira still won that spot. So
yeah,
I hope he looks good, and I hope that he is able to come off the bench and be dangerous or kind of rotate in as people need resting or whatever. But yeah, I just haven't really seen that in these preseason games yet. Yeah. So do y'all think Pochettino and Pereira, are those going to be our starters against LAFC?
Yeah, I do as well. I was more defending Diego as a super sub and just like his quality in general, but I do think, and for really encouraging reasons, Pereira will be the starter. And can we just we have to take a moment and say, like, when he was drafted over Mayaka, I think we all had a moment of like, what just happened? Is this the right decision? But Philip Mayaka, for those that don't know, has been loaned out to a USL side from the Colorado Rapids, and Pereira is looking like a nailed-on starter. So, I mean, even before the first kick, it's looking like it was a pretty solid use of that first draft pick. So, shout out to the scouts.
Yeah, I don't think that's a complete indictment of Mayaka because
he's done.
Because they've got Jack Price and Kellen Acosta starting in those spots there, and they might just be looking to put him somewhere to get minutes. But I think you're right in that Danny Pereira has kind of proven why they picked him there, and I think he's shown a lot of upside. Wolf has spoken pretty highly of him in press conferences recently, and like mentioned that they're working on like body shape and like pretty small, like detailed things. It's like no real critiques. It's just like little things that are going to make him those incremental amounts better that are really going to put him over the top. So I'm really excited about what Pereira is going to do this year. He's young, inexperienced. He's going to make some mistakes. He made on a rewatch of the Houston game, he made some pretty bad mistakes playing the ball around the back. As far as just kind of sloppy passes. But I think these are things that he'll grow out of and he'll learn, just kind of adapting to the pace of this new league. So yeah, excited to see what he can do. Let's move over to the right wing. It kind of seemed like Rodney Redes had made this his spot, but he came out of the Dallas match with a knee injury. And so he didn't play either of those, the games this weekend against San Antonio or RGV. And so Jared Stroud started in that spot. It seems to me that if Rodney's fully fit, he's going to be the guy. And if he's not, then Stroud will be the guy. Does that seem right to you guys?
Yeah, it does. And I feel more comfortable with Stroud being that guy than I think I might have coming in. But he's performed really well in the minutes he's had. It made a difference. So hopefully it's Rodney. But if not, I don't think it's the end of the world for depth for Stroud to take that spot.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe Rodney has a bit more of that attacking quality, like a bit more goal dangerous, a bit more likely to kind of make a defense a little bit scared. Stroud can do that stuff, but I think as far as like the work rate, tracking back, all the other stuff that Rodney does, Stroud is 100% competent at and like excels at those things. So I don't think he's going to like make mistakes that Rodney wouldn't have. I think he's just maybe slightly less dangerous going forward in the attack.
See, I think this is the hardest position to predict because I think if you're just asking blankly, who's the better person in that right wing spot, it's Redis. I think he's had a better preseason. But for this game, I would go Stroud because he has that Red Bull pressing mentality and that understanding of a press. And if you watch back on the games that LAFC struggle, it's when they're pressed high or counter pressed well. And if I'm Wolf, I'm saying, Stroud, you're going to start, and your job is going to be to pressure guys like Atuesta and their back line when they think they can play possession ball and play comfortably because they're going to underestimate us as this new team, and then immediately dish it off to someone like Cecilio who's going to be ready on the break. I think he would do that better than Redes, and I think the value of that in this game will be higher than just Rodney's overall superiority as a player. So personally, I would go Stroud.
Yeah, I can see that. Honestly, I think Rodney has the abilities to do all of those things, but Stroud does come from that pedigree, that Red Bull pedigree, right? So it's a thing that Rodney, I think, is capable of, but Stroud is like, what's the Batman quote? You live in the press. I was born in it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, that's so good. But it's true. And, I think if you think about how the game may unfold, you want Stroud pressing for 60 minutes to give you control and possibly an early lead. And then Rodney would be a more valuable substitute because he's going to come on with the same energy, but maybe a more lethal attacking approach. So I would start Stroud and have Rodney ready and hungry off the bench.
So, Chris, I'm going to oversimplify your position on the starting lineups for LA. But I mean, you seem to value a lot people that have done it in the league, right? Because I feel like that's when we talked about Cascante over Romagna, and we talked about Stroud over Redes. Is there a reason why the way LA plays is particularly suited to that approach rather than just rolling out your most talented 11? Or what's your thought on that?
Yeah, man, I think it's a good question because the thing with this matchup that's so interesting, and I'm interested to see what Wolf does, is we play similar styles of football. They both love possession, both enjoy elements of a press. I think they press differently, but they both utilize a pressing system. And the fact of the matter is, right now, man for man, LAFC is the better team. If we both try to play possession ball, they will possess the ball. And knowing that, I think you have to make sacrifices on just trying to be better across the board and put in those tactical decisions like a Stroud who can press in the right way, or maybe putting in a fullback who's more willing and capable to hang back and cope with a press in a certain way, or someone like Cascante who can do that on that low block maybe a little more competently to deal with it, and say, yeah, we're going to let you try and play, but we're going to play in a way that disrupts it rather than trying to impose our system over yours.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Wolf's going to stick to his guns and isn't going to change anything at all. But I think those are entirely valid points, and we may end up paying for him not changing anything.
I think you're right, unfortunately.
All right, let's move on to the last position, which I think is another one of the more interesting ones, is the number 9. So Danny Houston started against San Antonio with that starting group. But John Gallagher, as we talked about earlier, has played quite a few minutes in that spot, and has shown some bright spots. I don't want to say he's looked amazing, but he's shown little flashes of brightness, and then has played the position extremely differently. I watched him play, kind of made a point to watch what Houston was doing and what Gallagher were doing in the Dallas and Houston games. Gallagher was looking to stretch the back line to run in behind every time. That was his first thought, is I'm going to run. And it worked a lot of times. It kind of they were able to release the ball deep to him. And when they didn't, it opened up some space in the middle for other players to kind of move into. Danny Houston never even really tried to do that. He didn't try to run in behind. His first instinct is to kind of drop in and to kind of be like an extra midfielder to kind of play around and then dish it off and then run into the box and be there. But they play it super differently. I think Josh Wolf's ideal way of playing is more of what Houston wants to do. But there were times when what Gallagher was doing seemed to be more effective. So I'm a little bit torn here. Do you guys have a preference as to who you would see in this LAFC game?
Are you asking if I have a strong opinion? Is that even a question? Yeah, I think you got to go with Houston, not because of style of play, because I think you're right. Like Gallagher looked more threatening in ways, but when you think, and I think you said Wolf earlier mentioned the importance of a counter, especially in this game, Houston's going to be that link up. You know, you win the ball back in midfield, you immediately dish it to him, and he's going to be that quick one through ball to someone like Cecilio or Redis or Mane on the break, and that's how you beat LA in a big way. That's like one of the key elements, and I think that would be more important than Stroud trying to stretch the back line, because again, their midfield is so good. Like you can stretch the back line, but their midfield will make up for it. I just don't think that's going to be the key to unlock their defense as much as Houston making the right one-touch pass that we know he can do.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. And I think where, Gallagher's most effective is coming on at 67 minutes and stretching out the field for tired legs and whatever, not being the guy that's like in the middle holding up play for 90 minutes. So I would agree with you there.
All right. So we think we have a pretty good idea of who our starting 11 is going to be. Maybe come Saturday, we got it completely wrong and we're playing a 3-4-3 with Cascante at the 9. And I don't know, something
It's going to be the MLS Super Draft all over again. Yeah. Where we're like, we know exactly who we're going to get.
But let's talk a little bit about the opponent, LAFC. So that game is going to be Saturday, April 17th, first MLS game for Austin FC against maybe the top 2 teams in the league this season. Definitely the best team in the West as far like on paper goes. So let's go through a little bit of what LAFC is going to look like. Jeremiah, you want to tell us a little bit about their 2020 results?
Yeah, 2020 was not LAFC's year for a number of reasons. A lot of it being Carlos Vela's wife had a baby, which kept him out of MLS's back, if I remember right. And then when he came back to play, he picked up an MCL injury, and I think he only ended up playing 5 games last year. So in 2020, they made it to the knockout stage of MLS's back tournament because they finished second in their group. Then they finished 7th in the Western Conference during the regular season and were knocked out by Seattle in a not all that competitive match in the first round of the playoffs.
To be fair, they didn't have a great regular season on the whole, but when Vela did come back, they almost won CONCACAF Champions League.
Yeah, having him back and healthy will make a big difference to what they do. And then, the other big player is Diego Rossi, who doesn't get as much attention because Vela gets so much attention.
Yeah, but Rossi he kind of carried that team last year while Vela was gone.
He was incredible.
Brian Rodriguez, who was normally playing on the left wing for them, he's been loaned to Almeria in Spain. But they brought in Corey Baird from RSL. Is that where he was before?
I think so.
Corey Baird from RSL. He was the Rookie of the Year a few seasons ago. Really good, really solid winger. So he's kind of filled in that spot. Bradley Wright Phillips, who was one of their options at the 9, was not re-signed. So he's not on this team anymore. And so I went back and looked at what the lineups they played in their 2 preseason games. So they played 2 preseason games against the New England Revolution. They have brought in a few reserves. So Corey Baird is one that they brought in that will likely be a starter. Another one is Moon, I believe is his name.
Kim Moon Hwan,
yeah. As a right back, but I think he came in like a little bit injured and hasn't played in these preseason games and will likely not play on Saturday. So that will likely be Tristan Blackman's spot, which he looked pretty dang good when he was there playing there last year. He ended up being hurt a lot of the season too, which meant Latif Blessing was having to play at right back. That's not going to be the team we see. They're going to have a close to starting 11 ready and going. So from front to back, it'll either be Cisniega or Vermeer, my boy Vermeer. I kind of hope it's Vermeer. So
yeah, I hope we don't. Well, I mean, I guess I hope as an Austin fan, I hope it's Vermeer.
Yeah,
because he makes everything exciting.
Entertainment value, and then also he kind of screws up pretty big time sometimes, and that could.
The man loves a thrill.
Yeah, that could fall in Austin's favor for sure. So either Cisniega or Vermeer there, and then across the back it'll be Palacios, Segura, Murillo, Blackman. In the midfield, Atuesta, one of the best players in the league, and then most likely Latif Blessing, and then you could either see Cifuentes or K. I think probably, I don't know, I could see any combination of those four guys being in there. Atuesta for sure. Blessing seems to be pretty nailed on most of the time, and so I would guess K would be the top choice, but Cifuentes is also really good. So, and then the front three, something that I was interested to see is Danny Musovski played a lot of 9 for them last year. In these 2 preseason games, their front three were Rossi, Vela, and Baird, with Vela at the 9. And so it kind of seemed like a thing that they were forced to do a lot over the last couple of years. And it looks like they're choosing to do it right now. They didn't sign another forward, really, like a guy who's like definitely going to be the starter anyway. And so I thought that was interesting, but that's a pretty fearsome 3 if the worst attacker in your front 3 is Corey Baird, because he's definitely not a scrub in this league. So looking at this lineup, again, on paper, probably the best team in the West. I think the only other team in the whole league that is probably better than them on paper is the Columbus Crew. Chris, I know you have some opinions on how we can beat them. How does Austin FC beat LAFC on Saturday?
Y'all, when I tell you I've been in the weeds watching old LAFC highlights and breaking down their tactics this weekend, my word. But, it's an interesting thing. And I think it's actually really encouraging for us that Baird is going to be that starter, because I was watching the game against Seattle that they lost. And there's really 2 key things on both sides of the ball that they did that I think unsettles LAFC and exploits like their very few weak points. One, and by far the most important, is you guys were talking about Vela and Rossi. Their most important player is neither of those guys. It's Edward Atuesta. If you look at the percentage of games won and lost when they're missing someone, when he's gone, they are considerably worse. They've lost so many more games when he is out than when Vela is out. And it's because he is like their metronome. He's basically their Alex Ring, but instead of being this aggressive destroyer, he's this long ball distributing deep lying midfielder. And what's interesting about him is, even though he's really good on the ball and a really good passer, he kind of lingers too long. And sometimes he takes just one touch too many to think about his pass. So I think the key is, and I watched Seattle do this, I watched a few highlights where teams exploited this, but you aggressively press him, man mark him, double team him, whatever you have to do, you can unsettle him. And that's where they're weakest, is when they're on that counter press moment, when they are expecting to control the ball and dominate the game like they always do. You rough Atuesta off the ball, and suddenly their center backs are not prepared for that counter. And that's kind of why earlier I was talking about Stroud. Is if I'm Wolf, I'm saying, Jared, don't help support the wing. Let Pochettino do that. Man mark Atuesta. Don't let them even pass it back to him. Like, stick with him when they have the ball, so that they can't reset and control how they distribute it in their possession system. And it really unsettles them. And then the other key thing I noticed, and Seattle did this super well in the highlight I watched, was their wingers are incredible, right? Like, we all know this. And they're really good at one-on-one attacking play on the counter. What they aren't great at, and especially now that they don't have Diamande or Wright Phillips up top, is crossing the ball in. They don't have a big man to finish that anymore. And Baird is not a target striker. He's really good. He's more of a Gallagher type. He's going to stretch the line. He's quick. What would be wise of Wolf to do, and God willing he does it, is play the low block, keep the center backs back, really crowd the box with all 4, let them cross it in, rather than trying to go out to meet Rossi or Vela with the ball where they can beat you 1v1. And what I saw Seattle do that we should do as well is take your defensive midfielder, and when they really get up on that final third, bring him into the box. I saw, I think his name is João Paulo, is their DP defensive mid in Seattle. And every time they got high up on the wings, he dipped in and added an extra body. And it was just like a nightmare to pass a ball into, because there's so many bodies in the box. And then they're just stuck passing it around, trying to lure you out to get you 1v1 and create space. And if you just don't bite and leave that box crowded, they're kind of forced to either shoot long, which is always a gamble, or cross it in, which they don't really have a guy to cross it in to in Baird. And so I'm really excited to watch how they do that, especially with how they treat Atuesta. But again, if I'm Wolf, I'm saying whether it's Pereira, whether it's Stroud, whether it's Husin, someone has to be on him at all times. And like, I think if we win the game, I'd be curious to see how many touches he gets on the ball, because the lower the count that is, the better I think we're going to perform.
All right. Well, I think this game definitely has potential to be high scoring given the history of LAFC and what we've seen in preseason from Austin FC. But in any case, it should be a pretty exciting one. If for no other reason, this is going to be our first game. So y'all enjoy it wherever you're going to be watching it. Soak it all in. Like, it's not going to be the same thing as being in that stadium for the first time, but this is going to be the first time that our team takes a field in a competitive game, in a real game. So let yourself enjoy it. Even if the result doesn't go our way, enjoy it. This is going to be fun. So that game is going to be at 5 p.m. We think it's 5 p.m. It's advertised as the pregame starting at 4:30 and then the game starting at 5, but Fox normally doesn't show the right time for soccer games for whatever reason, but Fox is advertising the kickoff is at 5 p.m. and it's going to be on Big Fox, so national TV, whole country's going to be watching. It's going to be big time, and I can't wait. I think that's going to be it for this little segment. Let's take a quick break, and we're going to be right back with Mike Craven, who is the beat writer for the Austin American-Statesman. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community transparency and client education, and it was also a law firm that was nominated in the Austin Chronicle Best of poll, but that closes in, for today, Jeremiah, that closes in like an hour and a half. For those of you listening, it's already closed.
Hopefully they end up with a good result there, but in any case, they were in the 4 finalists. So to find out more about what makes FVF different and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case, you can go to fvf.law. Once again, that's fvf.law. Well, you don't need words to tell me things that drive me wild, right out of my brain. All right, our guest today is Mike Craven, who is the Austin FC beat writer for the Austin American-Statesman. Mike, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Thank y'all for having me.
To start off with, just tell us a little bit about your background in sports media and how you came to be the Austin FC reporter for the Statesman.
Yeah, I took an interesting route. I started in community newspapers. My first job out of college, I was a sports editor of the Taylor Daily Press and the Hutto News. From there, I moved on to Rivals.com, and I ran the UTSA site. I went to UTSA for college, so when they started a football team, I had a chance to run that site for Rivals.com. So I did that until 2017, when I was hired by the Austin American-Statesman to be the recruiting writer. So I covered high school football. Instead of covering teams, I covered basically the best players throughout the state who Texas wanted. I did a list called the Fab 55. I also did some Big 12 coverage. I'm a sports gambler, so I did a sports betting column for USA Today. And so I thought when I was having the meeting with them about kind of talking about Austin FC coverage plans that it was going to be to help out on just some random stuff. And then it was, no, this is a full-time job we'd like to offer you. I'm an Austinite. I know that's kind of a unicorn thing to be these days, like actually somebody who's from here. So the opportunity to cover our first professional franchise was something I couldn't pass up, especially if it meant I didn't have to interview teenagers anymore. And so it's been that happened on March 1st. I took the job. It started on March 8th. So it's been a fun first month. I've just kind of, dug as far in as I could, really.
So what can readers, Austin FC fans, expect from the Statesman's coverage and your coverage of the club going forward?
Yeah, I mean, we want to be on par with everybody. I mean, this is my full-time job. We want to devote as much coverage to this as we do, say, like UT Sports and stuff. Like we are Austin's newspaper. This is Austin's professional sports franchise. So I mean, for example, I'm going to the game in LA. You know, I have flights booked for Denver. I have flights booked for all the road games leading into that first home game. If practices were allowed to be attended, I would be at every single one of those. So, you know, we want to be covering this as much as we can, as much as the budget will allow. And so far, the bosses have allowed me to do anything and everything I've been able to want to do. And hopefully, as the season starts and stuff, we can continue to cover it as much as possible.
Nice. Yeah, you gotta find that hill where the supporters were the other day and go stand on that to see the practices.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true.
Have you seen I did like a little tour of the stadium yesterday. The press box looks really nice right now. So are you excited about being in that?
Yeah, it was cool. I got to go to the stadium kind of when I took the job. They invited me to walk around, me, Kirk Bowles, and my editor. And so we did the tour. They showed me the press box. I was told I get to pick my seat. So I'm pretty excited about it. The stadium's beautiful. Since y'all have been there, I guess a lot of people have been allowed in there. I mean, it's incredible. I don't know what I was expecting when I walked in there. I guess maybe something between Dell Diamond and Memorial Stadium for UT football maybe. And it kind of blew me out of the water. I thought it was great. I thought some of the random little features in it with the lights that can turn a bunch of different colors, with the seats that are mesh. I think it's going to be a pretty awesome event, pretty awesome stadium.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it'll be like. You know, hopefully we get to June and it'll be all full of fans and supporters, and we'll blow the roof off the place for sure. I think that'll be exciting. So you wrote this morning about the journey into existence of the club. Is there anything like in particular that stood out when you're researching the piece that maybe you didn't know or was a little bit of a surprise?
Yeah, I mean, I had followed it casually as a resident of Austin, as somebody who works at the Austin American-Statesman, somebody who likes soccer, but I don't know if I, really covered or really watched it and paid attention to it, like every single detail moving forward. So to just kind of learn how much of it was really just a real estate deal. At the end of the day, it was they wanted a stadium and they wanted to be in Austin, and they figured out a way to get the stadium to work here. And if the stadium's not within a 15-20 mile radius of downtown Austin, this team's not here. And so it was as much a real estate deal as anything else. And I thought that was interesting. It's always weird to get a peek behind the curtain. Some of it's reportable, some of it's not. Some people have different versions of what they think happened a couple years later, depending on where they are with the organization and stuff. And so there's just a lot to kind of sift through. And there was a lot to go back and research, but luckily, like Chris Bills, who covered for us previously, had done a tremendous job. So I had a pretty easy roadmap to go back and kind of do that simple little research about it.
Yeah, we were way too involved in it during all of that. So you should probably.
I saw a picture of you. We almost used a picture of you. There's a picture of you with like a scarf holding up at a section or something. And so we had to pick a photo for the Sunday newspaper, and that was one of the ones that my editor had kind of thrown out there, or whatever. So yeah, we almost used a photo of you. I saw that. I was like, I met him at Zilker Park.
Yeah, we used to joke that our podcast was a beer and politics podcast for a while, because that's pretty much all we were talking about. There was no soccer to be talked about, so we were just covering the city council meetings and things like that.
Yeah, that's something I'm glad I missed. I feel like I'm a decent writer, but I went into journalism specifically to stay away from that kind of like beat. I did not want to. I wouldn't be a sports writer. I'd go make real money if I wanted to cover politics and that kind of stuff. So I don't. And so I'm glad I got to miss most of that, and I just get to cover the actual sport.
Hey, I was like looking through the Twitter this afternoon. And I saw a shout out to, I think it was from you, and we can cut this if I'm wrong, but it was to Joe Lowry, our friend Joe Lowry, who who we've interviewed on the show before. Did you talk to him in researching this story, or was that was the season preview?
I put out a piece today online. I think it'll come out into the paper tomorrow or maybe the next day. And I got with a few guys like Matthew Doyle and some other guys to kind of, I asked them all the same 5 questions, got their answers back and compiled it into a list. And so that came out online. You can get that at statesman.com right now. I learned a lot. See, I've been trying to do pieces that make me learn about it. It doubles, right? Like I get to learn what the national guys, what the big picture guys kind of think about Austin FC that maybe I didn't keep up with the day-to-day stuff for the last year and a half. and it doubles as a piece that people can click on and maybe get that same thing from. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword there coverage-wise.
And do you have like when you're writing stuff like this, I mean, do you have like a specific, assume this is true, like target for that? I'm guessing like people who are at city council until 4:00 in the morning have been involved in every step of the way. Is probably not. I mean, who are you usually writing for when you're writing for that? When you're writing pieces
I think that's the difficult part of this journey, right? You have a group that is hardcore, that's been paying attention to this, every detail, that knows soccer in and out, that knows Major League Soccer, knows the sport of soccer, who may find some of it a little redundant and kind of like over there, like it's just not something I need. Like I did an MLS for Dummies pieces, right? That went into Sunday's paper. That's not for people who follow soccer and follow the Austin FC journey for the last 3 years. So you have to kind of mix in the coverage of, okay, this can be detail oriented for hardcore fans. Can you do some like lineup projections and stuff like that? But then you also need to do some overreaching stuff, because of the 20,000 people in the stadium, there's only going to be about 5,000 that really pay attention on a weekly basis. There's only going to be about 3,000 that pay attention on a daily basis. And that's inside the stadium. That's not even just people who are watching on television, who listen to the radio, who are reading the paper. So we do need to remember that a lot of the portion of the fan base is not living and breathing this stuff. And you don't want to go too over their head, or you're not going to get the readership that you need to for the beat to continue on, right? Because we will, at the end of this year, go, okay, how many clicks did we get? How many subscribers are reading this? Is it worth it to travel to Los Angeles? I hope the answer to that is yes. And it's just up to me, I guess, to kind of figure out that balance to make it successful over this year, so we can continue to cover this the way, in my opinion, it should be covered.
We hope the answer is yes, too.
Me too. It's job security. I hope so as well. I could, in this industry, if you're not working, it's not, you can just go apply to the newspaper down the street, right? So, there's only a couple places you can work. So I would like to stay in this city for as long as possible.
I hear there's a lot of money in independent podcasting.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I've done that a few times as well. I've heard that well.
One of these days, we're going to convince stamps.com that this is worth investing in. We're just not quite there yet.
Yeah, well, the market seems excited, right? I mean, like everything so far has been really well received. Everything I've been to has been pretty well attended. I mean, it does seem like this city is really ready for the soccer team. And I think there's a lot of this city that is excited about this because they haven't had something before. If you're not a UT grad, if you're not a Texas fan growing up or whatever, the city has a hole sports-wise. And so hopefully this fills it for that part of the city that kind of feels like they don't have anything on their own here. And I think it also gets the Texas fans that are waiting for football season. I mean, this starts in April. You got 5 months to build that kind of momentum going into football season. So I think it's going to be pretty good.
Well, do you have a bold prediction for us? So what do you see? Where's Austin going to finish up?
I mean, I think there's a clear separation, right? Like you look at the top 4 or 5 clubs in the West, you feel like, depending on what order you think those guys are going to be there, I think they can compete for that 6th, 7th, 8th spot with teams like FC Dallas, the Colorado Rapids and stuff like that. So we'll learn early on. I think the interesting part about this schedule is we're going to figure out pretty early kind of how good this team is. I don't know what record they need to have to make people feel good about it after that 7-game road trip, but I think we're going to know what this soccer team is by the end of that road trip. So it'll be interesting. I don't know. Where are y'all at with that? Are y'all kind of similar in the 6, 7, 8 spot?
Yeah, we are. One of us picked them 7th, and one of us picked them outside of the playoffs because they're a traitor.
Yeah, it's reverse psychology. I do this gambling, right? Like I'll bet against the team I'm rooting for occasionally, and that way, if they lose, I still get a little bit of money. If they win, then I'm not too worried about losing that money.
All right,
I do that occasionally with UTSA football.
I like this strategy. Yeah. All right. So before we wrap up, tell our listeners where they can find your work and where they can find you online.
Yeah, if you go to statesman.com, you just go to the sports section, and there's an Austin FC tab there, and we should have, kind of a running list of every story we do. We're going to have something at least once a day leading up to the first game. We have some pretty cool stuff in store. I think that I can't really talk about it yet, but I think we have some exclusive stuff that's coming up that's going to be pretty exciting. And And then on Twitter, you can find me at Craven Mike. I feel like that's kind of where everybody goes now. And then we're going to try to do some like Instagram live stuff at half times of games, since I'll be in the press box and stuff. And so that's at Statesman. I think Statesman Craven. I'm not the best social media person. I'm going to have to get better at that.
We can try to find it and put it in the show notes for you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Mike. This has been great.
All right. Appreciate it, guys. See y'all around.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
We'd like to thank Mike Craven one more time for joining us. We'll put his Twitter handle in the show notes, and then you can find his work at the Austin American Statesman. We'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. That's going to help our audience grow, expose us to more people as this first game approaches, and then as we go through this first season. So we'd really appreciate you giving us a review, telling a friend, whatever that looks like. If you want to continue that soccer conversation, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at LViajero87. Jeremiah's at JBentley_ATX.
And we together are at Moon Tower Soccer.
That's right. We now have the at Moon Tower Soccer handle live. So go give us a follow there. I think we're going to do some sort of promotion here in the near future. We'll figure that out for the next episode. But for now, go to at Moon Tower Soccer. Give us a follow there. You can also visit the Striker Texas website to get all the best Austin FC and Texas soccer coverage. What's an article they should check out, Jeremiah?
Yeah, so on Friday, April 9th, Chris Bills wrote an article about Rodney Redes, with the headline being that he's proving to be the Austin FC building block that Josh Wolf envisioned. So we've talked a lot about Rodney and his development over the last few weeks, and I think his positive development, and Chris does a really good job of digging into what he's able to do and what he's meant to the team, and it's a good piece that you should read.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening. We'll be back in 1 week with a new episode of Moon Tower Soccer, where we're going to review Austin FC's first ever MLS match. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.